Tap 3 mana, ice cream with banana. Now our problem solved. Welcome, Stratters, to my top 10 Magic the Gathering video. This top 10, we're going to talk about the top 10 worst Magic the Gathering cards ever printed. Now, you may be asking, why are you watching this video? I'm not going to play any of these cards. Well, Sunday Magic during Onslaught Odyssey block, I had the tournament format on Sundays where each player would donate one rare in their collection. Could be a good rare, could be a bad rare, but whatever rare you didn't want, you would put it in a pile, and the tournament would be any format. You just duke it out. At the end of the tournament, first place would get a decent rare, and then second place would get a worst rare, and so on until last place got the very last pick of rare in the pile. It's a great tournament format to play. If you don't have any money, you don't want to spend money on Magic the Gathering tournaments, you can have friendly mulligans. It's a great way, just to play some Magic the Gathering without worrying too much about the prize. And at least it's a tournament where there's a prize at all. So this was back in the early days of Magic the Gathering, pre-Mirrodin, where Richard Garfield was in control. And this was the early days where Magic the Gathering didn't really know which direction it was going. They didn't know which cards were good. They just wanted to know, how players would react psychologically to the cards, how players would try to shape the game with these cards. So a lot of bad cards slip through the crack. So without further ado, let's start with the top 10. Okay, so let's start with the entertainment value. Coming in at number 10, Scornful Egotist from Scourge. Scourge was a card set where the creatures all counted the converted mana cost of spells you controlled. There was a creature, 3 mana. You could search for a creature with casting cost 6 or more and put it in your hand. It was a theme for the set. Scornful Egotist was the pre-release card for Scourge. Everybody got one in my old card shop. You were supposed to combo this card with another card, I forget, that lets you draw a card equal to the highest converted mana cost of creatures you control. So you were supposed to play the Scornful Egotist for 3, morph it, and draw 8 cards. Unfortunately, that never happened in this set. None of us played the card, and all of us who got it in the pre-release were just left scratching our heads. Why would anyone print this card? Coming in at number 9, Sorrow's Path from the Dark. Sorrow's Path is a card that's so bad, maybe it's even good. It deals 2 damage to you and to each creature you control whenever it's tapped. So it gave me an idea when I was older, maybe just cast a donate, give it to your opponent, and then twiddle it, and tap it, and make 2 damage to your opponent's creatures. Sorrow's Path, I remember playing it when I was 7, and I couldn't read very well when I was 7, so if it had a lot of words in the card, I just didn't read it. So I remember playing this, and playing as my older brother, and he said, you read the card. So I read the card the first time after tapping it, and I said, this card's bad. So if a 7-year-old can figure it out that this card's bad, you should believe that this card is really bad. Can I add that it doesn't tap for mana? And you can only play 1 land per turn in Magic the Gathering, which made the card even worse. So this card ended up being a reward for winning a tournament in Magic the Gathering Online, so this is an MTGO if you want to pick up a copy. Coming in at number 8, it's Chimney. This card was a meme back in the day. Before the Stormcrow meme with 1/2 flyings, this was the first 1/2 flying meme. It's black 4, it's a 1/2 flying, it's terrible body, was put into graveyard from play. Your opponent puts a card from his or her hand on top of his or her library. Now, the reason why there's such a high casting cost of Chimney Imp was Wizards R&D was told, commons aren't supposed to 2-for-1 your opponent. It's supposed to be at the uncommon level or the rare level. So Chimney Imp, which could conceivably trade with the 2/1 and destroy another card, well, that's a 2-for-1. So they made the casting cost so high that no one ever played the card. Coming in at number 7, Adventurers Guildhouse. I had 3 of these cards back in Legends. It says all your green legends gain bands with other. Now, bands with other is a mechanic even more confusing than banding. And may I add that Adventurers Guildhouse doesn't tap for mana? You'll find a recurring theme in these top 10s. I had a friend, Dan, who had a paper deck about 100 to 200 cards. He liked doing decks like that. And I said, Dan, you play a white-green Sisay deck. Why don't you put Adventurers Guildhouse in there? And he said, thanks. And then he played it once, and then someone told him it didn't tap for mana, and he said, this card's garbage, and he just threw it away. There's an entire cycle of these cards. There's 5 of them, so I'm declaring this a 5-way tie of this entire cycle of bands with other lands. All right, coming in at number 6, it's Dripping Dead. Dripping Dead's from Legions. Legions was a set that was notoriously slow. It was slow on purpose. It's supposed to get players to play more 6 and 7 mana creatures, and topped off at a Chroma. And Chroma actually ended up being a good card, even though most players thought it was bad, because the cards in the set were so bad that you often had to resort to an 8 casting cost card to win the game. Now, Dripping Dead is a 4/1 creature for 6. It can't block. And when it deals damage to a creature, destroy that creature, it has Venom. So basically, since it can't block, it can never destroy your opponent's best creature, because your opponent's creatures are all going to go through. And when it attacks, it's just going to kill your opponent's worst creature, and it's going to die because it only has 1 toughness. And if your opponent has a 1/1 first strike creature for 1 mana, like a Tundra Wolf, Dripping Dead's just going to die. That's right, a 6 mana creature loses against a 1 mana creature. So this card's terrible. Coming in at number 5, Tower of Quarrel. Another card from the dark. Tap target creature can't be blocked by walls. It gives a creature the Juggernaut ability. This came soon after Revised, where Juggernaut couldn't be blocked by walls. And no, this is an artifact creature. This is just an artifact. So your opponent has to be playing walls, and walls don't obey the rules of Magic Theory. It's always a card disadvantage playing walls. At best, you top deck a wall and your opponent top decks a creature, and they just wall blocks the creature, nothing happens. At worst, if you top deck a wall and your opponent top decks a bolt, you still die. So Tower of Quarrel doesn't do anything because players aren't supposed to be playing with walls in general anyway, unless you have a deck specifically for walls. But even then, I wouldn't sideboard in Tower of Quarrel because there's so much other better cards out there. I was almost going to make my Magic the Gathering username Tower of Quarrel, but it was taken, so I'm glad I picked the next best thing, which is walloficecream. Coming in, number 4, Oasis. This was the worst card in Chandelar. That's the Microprose video game for the Windows PC back in 1996, 97. This is a set that's mostly 4th edition cards. They threw in the Power 9 just for prizes at the end of the dungeons, but you had most of the 4th edition to play with. So it's worst kind of format, slower than block, basically. And Oasis was in there, and yeah, even if you're playing with only 4th edition cards, you still wouldn't play Oasis because it doesn't tap for mana. What made this worse is this is a card from way back in Arabian Nights. So your precious card slots, which could just have been a sinkhole, which is also a common, was instead filled up by Oasis. So don't play this card. Alright, so now we're going to go into the juicy parts of the video, which means these cards are going to be all rares. Are you ready? Number 3, the Lace Cycle. Now, there's 5 of these cards. If you read the spell, it just turns something blue. So if you had a Circle of Protection blue, and you wanted to 2-for-1 yourself, you could Thought Lace your opponent's creature and play a Circle of Protection blue and prevent all damage dealt to it. But who would play a Circle of Protection blue? This was back in Richard Garfield's test cards. This is all the way back from Alpha. Richard Garfield just printed like 2 of each of these cards as a pre-alpha test of Magic the Gathering. And I don't know what he was thinking, but these cards kind of leaked through. So keep in mind, you could crack open a box of Revised, and you could come across several of these laces. I actually owned 18 of these and used most of them in my Sunday tournaments. And guess what? Cards like Life Lace and Thought Lace were the last cards printed, picked on the whole pack, because all these cards that were printed were just terrible. You could have gotten a dual land in your rare slot, but instead you get a lace? How embarrassing. Coming in at number 2, Apocalypse Chime. This was part of a set of cards that was supposed to be in every single set. There was City in a Bottle for Arabian Nights that destroyed all cards from Arabian Nights expansion. And I think the last one was this card, Apocalypse Chime, destroyed everything from Homelands. Homelands was a terrible set in the first place, and I think after this was played, I think Magic the Gathering finally realized that players weren't going to play with City in a Bottle, they weren't going to play with Apocalypse Chime, and they finally stopped printing these artifacts in every single set. And I'm glad they did, because I have never seen any of these played. It's a rare, so if you'd like to just donate this to one of those one rare to get in entry fees, go ahead. Now I'll give you a moment to think of some. You've seen some pretty bad cards. Can you guess the worst card printed in Magic the Gathering? I'll give you a second to pause the video and see if you can guess the worst card ever printed. Are you ready? Divine Intervention from Legends. 8 mana. It doesn't make the game a tie. It makes the game a tie later. Yeah, its converted casting cost is 8. That you read that right. You need 8 lands in play in order to cast this card. So why is this the worst card ever printed? Because like I said, well, look, a Pearl Unicorn's a white 2. It's 2/2 vanilla. It's a common strictly worse than White Knight. No one ever plays Pearl Unicorn. I could go on and on. There's a lot of cards in Magic the Gathering that you just never could play. Well, I picked these 10 cards because they're good comedic value. The cards are worse than nothing. And Divine Intervention Story is the most comedic value of all, because it got banned. That's right. Divine Intervention was on the banned list, BNR list, for Magic the Gathering for a while. And I have a theory of why. Because back in the early days of Magic the Gathering, there were single elimination tournaments. Swiss wasn't really popular yet. And I can remember a tournament house in Traverse City, Michigan that still had the rule late in Magic the Gathering's life of single elimination, no time limit. And I remember a tournament there where 2 mono blue control decks just played out to turn 40 or 50, just doing counterspell wars with each other, and the whole tournament house was waiting for mono blue control versus mono blue control to duke it out. Divine Intervention, I could see you like colluding with your friends to put Divine Intervention in your deck to force the game into a tie for these kind of smaller tournaments. And yeah, anyone who you could get like 3-1 and still end up in first place, because everyone would be eventually like end up in a tie or something. And Swiss, you could contaminate the whole tournament house with Divine Interventions. Making the games a tie is a mistake. It's really boring. You'll find there's actually a list of vintage banned cards, like Scheherazade, that makes the entire game restart. It's just a complete waste of time. Being a card that actually was so bad it had to be banned makes the top of 10 list at number 1. So thanks for watching the video. If I said anything that was completely wrong or stupid, leave a comment below and embarrass me. I'm trying to get better at this. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.